Hey, this is Lorraine Cohen, and I want to talk a little bit more about desires and expectations, especially as it relates to health. Now, it may not seem that there is a relationship between health, but there is. At least I have found that time and time again. Now, earlier today, in the first part of this series of desires and expectations, it looks like it's going to be a series of a few of them. I talked about how you can have a strong desire for something, but you have a conflict inside that is in contradiction to what your desire is. And I gave some examples of how that conflict creates and why some things don't manifest the way that we want. We're sending mixed messages to the universe that says we want one thing, but we're doing something else. And so the most important thing is to come into greater alignment with our intentions, our desires, and our expectations so that we're all lined up and that way we're manifesting more of what we want. So how might it relate to your health? Well, I want to give you a couple of examples of how that can play out. Let's say you have a strong desire, you have a big dream, and many of us are at breakout points in our lives where we're starting to step into a bigger and greater expression of who we're meant to be. You might have some shakeups happening in your life right now, and you're in the process of wanting to play on a bigger platform, whatever that looks like. So we have this deep desire, and the expectations may be that in order for you to be at that level of success that you have in your mind, you have to be perfect the whole time. You have to know everything. You have to have it all together. You can't show any of your softness, or you can't show any of your transparency, or people will not think that you're the expert that you pretend to be, so to speak. The fraud factor is a big thing for a lot of people, feeling that we have to look a certain way, we have to sound a certain way, we have to be a certain way in order to be credible. And so it can put a tremendous amount of stress on how one has to be. So we've got this great desire, we have all of these expectations that we feel we have to live into. And so what may happen is you find that you come down with something, you're not feeling well, or you may, be flat on your back for a period of time. And why that can happen is that some part of us gets really scared. It's one thing to have a dream that's kind of out there. And when it gets a little bit closer, some of the fears that can come up is my life is about to change in really big ways. And we can get scared about what some of those changes are because there are some beliefs inside that we have to give up things, that life has to become much more difficult. There's going to be so much more stress that has to be managed. And so when we get sick, it gives us permission to step back and to use that not feeling good as a legitimate reason to not pursue what it is that we say that we want. And it looks very reasonable because, hey, I'm not feeling well. I need to be taking care of myself, and therefore I need to put whatever it is that I'm desiring aside so that I can take care of myself. But what we don't always connect with is the fact that we have created that situation out of our discomfort, out of perhaps some part that feels I don't deserve to be this successful. I don't deserve to have all of this. So there's a correlation between what we're feeling inside, what we're wanting, what we feel that we have to live into, and then what we create that could give us reason to not create that dream that we're wanting. So I'm wondering if this is landing with anybody. Maybe you've had some things that you've been wanting to manifest, and there seems to be some wrenches that have been thrown into it. I'll give you another example, as a personal example. One of my desires is to be the strongest and the most effective support for people as a coach, as a healer. And so I've got some very, very high standards. And so I had a client that I was working with quite a number of years ago, and we had one session where I can honestly say I was not at my best. and I got off the call and I could feel myself just beating myself up. So what did I do? I got into my car and promptly put a dent in it. And I realized so quickly that in my disappointment with myself, in my anger with myself, I punished myself by doing something to my car. Could have been hurt myself. I could have hurt myself in some way. I was fortunate, and the dent that I put in my car wasn't terrible, but it was enough to get my attention and realize that I was holding myself to such a high level of expectations that I wasn't allowing myself to feel my humanness. I felt embarrassed. I felt ashamed. I felt like I should have done this and I should have done that. And I realized that I needed to forgive myself and know that I'm not going to be perfect all the time. I need my clients to understand I'm not going to be perfect all the time. When I mess up, I'll take responsibility for that. And while that's great to have in the relationship, the most important place where you need to feel that from a place of self-love is within yourself. So when there's this harshness inside, we then beat ourselves up in some way that oftentimes can end up in some sort of a health situation. It's pretty interesting, the kinds of things that we do to ourselves, isn't it? The other thing that I've also found from my experience is that anger, the emotions that we repress inside, if we don't release them, they manifest into all sorts of things, typically in the form of some misalignment physically, a disease, an illness, some symptom that is difficult for us, that really gets our attention and forces us to make some difficult changes sometimes, or to let go of some things or ask for help. And that can come from, again, that punishing part of ourselves, or the inability to forgive ourselves and let some things go. And so the desires can be, is I have to be a perfect person, and I'm not allowed to show up this way, and whatever those rules and expectations that we put on ourselves that don't allow, again, another aspect of our humanness. And so when that happens, we can be more harsh on ourselves than anybody. And I'm a believer that if the energy is not being released, if we're not moving those emotions out of our body so that we come to a place of peace, then we're holding it inside. And whatever is not being released is going to do something inside of your body. It's going to manifest something psychologically, emotionally, mentally, in some sort of a health pattern. So it's so important to see where those misalignments are, so that we can come back into harmony with ourselves. We can come back into that place of self-love, forgiveness. Realize that this is a journey that has so many gifts, and most importantly, to be gentle with yourself when you realize that something that you are wanting is out of alignment with your expectations, and there's an outcome that has manifested as a result of that you don't want, that occurred unconsciously. And now that you begin to get glimpses of the correlation between those components, you can make some different changes. You can take charge of your life in amazing ways and turn any situation around. It may take a little bit longer, but aren't you worth it? So I hope that perhaps this has generated some ideas. Maybe you're having a few ahas. Maybe you feel like I've told a little bit of your story. And most importantly, please be gentle with yourself. We're all learning. We're all discovering, recovering, uncovering things about ourselves. And we can use that positively, or we can use that against ourselves. It's always a choice. So on that note, I'm going to wish you a wonderful day or a wonderful evening, and just be good to yourself, okay? Have a great night.